Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Spartan Combat. They're our title sponsor here on the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast, and it would mean the world to me if you would check out SpartanCombat.com. We just released the website. It's a whole new design, bunch of new gear on there. Check it out, SpartanCombat.com.
So when I made the team, I just know in my heart of hearts, that was just pure elation.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast presented by Spartan Combat. I'm your host, Ryan Warner. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is Olympic gold medalist Brandon Slay, the pride of Amarillo, Texas. He graces us with his presence and tells the tale that's almost unbelievable. In the spring of 2000, he entered the U.S. Open as the 7th seed, and 5-6 months later, he's an Olympic gold medalist. It's an unbelievable story. I hope you enjoy it. Fan of the week goes to my man, Nathaniel J. Soroga, a state champ for the great Southeast Polk High School out of the Des Moines, Iowa area. Thank you so much for listening, Nathaniel. I appreciate it. And folks, if you want to support this show, please support our sponsor, Spartan Combat. Go to SpartanCombat.com to check out their new gear. They have some sick Kyle Dake threads going on at SpartanCombat.com. That's it, folks. Let's get to the interview with the great Brandon Slay. Folks, we are here with Brandon Slay. Brandon, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Absolutely. Excited to talk. You've had so many epic matches, one of which is in your office there when you beat Joe at the U.S. Nationals. And, man, I just cannot wait to get into it. Let's start with this, though. I understand when you were looking at University of Pennsylvania, coming out of high school, you were a 3-time state champ from Texas. But you ended up going to Foxcatcher as part of your recruiting trip. What do you remember about that experience?
Well, I just remember that what a wonderful opportunity as a high school wrestler to be able to meet Dave Schultz. And I remember watching him win the gold medal when I was 8 years old. I wasn't there in person in LA, but I was watching it on TV, watching him win the gold medal, and Mark Schultz and Bobby Weaver and Bruce Bumgardner, Randy Lewis. That was a great time for an 8-year-old to watch wrestling because, as we know, the Russians didn't come, and we won a lot of gold medals. So to know that what recruiting trip that I was actually meeting him in person, this is a guy who's an Olympic champion, who was a legend in the sport clearly already. It was just an honor for me. And then not only him, there was a lot of other amazing wrestlers there at Foxcatcher that were around. And, I was just like a kid, in a candy store, just excited to take it all in. And ultimately, that wasn't the number one reason I went to Penn, but to be able to go to an Ivy League school, the Wharton School of Business, and to have the opportunity to train with Dave Schultz out at Foxcatcher, that was just a great combination for me.
And the Penn coach at the time was Coach Rainier. I don't know a lot about Coach. I know he's been a staple for that program. What kind of philosophy did he bring to the program when you were there?
He loved freestyle, which was big for me. I think some college coaches, they're just, they're so zoned in on folk style and they don't have the international flavor, in they just don't desire freestyle and Greco so much. But because he loved it, because he was actually a big fan of us going out to Foxcatcher, he encouraged his Penn wrestlers to go out there and train there. Then that was something that got me excited. But I think Coach Reyna was just a visionary, and I think he did a great job of selling me on being a trailblazer, being a pioneer, because Penn had not had an All-American in over 30 years.
Wow.
So when I was being recruited to go there, it wasn't like I was meeting all these juniors and seniors that, had been All-Americans and I was just going to fit right into the program. It wasn't like that. It was more of, Brandon, we haven't had an All-American in over 30 years, but you could be that guy. And you could help, get this program, get the ball rolling with this program. And if you desire to be a trailblazer like that and to be willing to kind of have the attitude that the obstacle is the way, then this is the program for you. And so, you compare that to, I visited Penn State, I visited Lehigh, I visited, Wisconsin, I visited Illinois, where, you go to those rooms on the wall, there's pictures of NCAA champions and they've had tons of All-Americans. And so if I would have gone to one of those programs, it would have been more like, hey, come along board and, you can be an All-American too. And, once you do, we'll pat you on the back and you would have done your job. Where Penn, it's a totally different scenario. It was more of a Coach Reyna had a vision that program could be a top 10 team. And ultimately Penn was. It became a top 10 team. And, as humbly I got second in the NCAAs, 97, second, 98. So I became a 2-time All-American. And then that next year, after I graduated, Penn had 3 All-Americans all in one year. And then in 2000, Brett Motter won the NCAA title, right? He became NCAA champ. And then Matt Valenti comes along and wins 2 NCAA titles. So, I was just one wrestler. I was one kind of brick in the house that wrestling built there. But that trailblazing spirit, that pioneering spirit, it came to fruition. So it was really special.
So I didn't realize that was the beginning of Coach's career as well, kind of when you were coming on?
No, he'd been coaching, I think, for about maybe 7 or 8 years. Interesting story about Coach Reyna. He took over the program when he was 23 years old. He was the youngest Division I coach, in the country.
Wow.
And so they were thinking about dropping the program at Penn. And after he graduated, he was like, well, I don't want that to happen. So, he stepped in as the head coach at 23. He coached Penn wrestling for, I believe, 19 years. And he had 17 All-Americans,
wow.
3 NCAA champions. And then he took a break for about 12 years. And actually he worked for some startups. He was very kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset, spent some time, in the business world. And then he came back, thankfully, about 4 years ago. And so he took the program back over. And so it's just been great, for me to run our Olympic Training Center, the Pennsylvania Regional Training Center, where I don't work for Penn at all. I run the PRTC, but clearly I work really closely alongside Coach Reyna and the Penn wrestlers.
That's awesome that he came back. I didn't realize that. I'll have to have him on the show. He seems like a visionary in his own right, and I love people like that. He's
an amazing leader. I always tell people he's one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around. And if I didn't believe that, I would have not moved my family from Colorado Springs. My 3 kids. Now I have a 4th kid. I would not move my family from Colorado Springs back to the East Coast if it wasn't for Coach Reyna, being here and being a leader, in this program.
I got to tell you, I saw a picture on Instagram of you smoking some brisket. The scenery out there is absolutely amazing in Pennsylvania. Yeah. I saw that picture. I'm like, is he in like the Swiss Alps or something? It was just beautiful. It was like a 25-pound brisket.
Yeah, that's an area called the Endless. It's called the Endless Mountain Range. It's up kind of in north central Pennsylvania. And you drive past Wilkes and you just kind of keep heading northwest. And then you get up there and we were on about 110 acres. There's a Penn alumni named Monty Capek that he inherited about 110 acres from his father, who actually wrestled at Wyoming Seminary. And, Monty wrestled in high school outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And so Monty he has some land there. He has a wrestling room there. And so he invited us during this COVID situation when we couldn't train at Penn. He said, hey, come up here. You can stay on our land. You can train in the wrestling room. And, there's a bunch of great hikes and, waterfalls you can jump off of. So we took about think we took about 17 guys up there, and we trained for a full week, and it was really magical. So yeah, we trained, but like you said, we had a lot of time on our hands in the middle of the day. So yeah, I got a 15-pound brisket and a 10-pound brisket, and we smoked those over about 8 or 9 hours. And so the guys destroyed all 25 pounds of meat. So it was a wonderful day for the PRTC.
It looked awesome. And I could see why you'd move your family back there. And obviously you have the long history there. But let's get into it. One of the topics I am most excited to talk about is your rivalry with Joe Williams. I'm from Chicago. I'm not from Chicago. I'm from Illinois. We're recording this in Chicago. And anyone who's listening to this show is going to shoot me if you're saying this, but I was obsessed with Joe Williams. And I mention it almost every episode, so they're probably sick to death of me hearing this. But, as a kid, he was just from Illinois. He wrestled at Iowa. He was awesome. He won the Midlands like 100 times. So he was a huge idol of mine. And I know you wrestled him a bunch of times. When was your first match? Like, when did the rivalry really start?
So we wrestled 3 times in college. He beat me in Iowa Penn duel. He beat me, mentioned Midlands, one of those Midlands championships he won. He beat me in the finals. And then, so I was 0-2 against him. And then I wrestled him his senior year as well. And the Nationals were in Cleveland at Cleveland State that year, 1998. So I lost to him in the finals of the NCAAs. So after getting second the year before, I have Joe Williams going for his 3rd NCAA title in a row. So, I mean, he was clearly a challenging opponent to have in that match, but lost that match. And then the next year we both came out of college and we're both on the senior circuit. And then we wrestled in the quarterfinals of the US Open, and it was 2-2, and we went to overtime, and he got in on a single leg in overtime. And they end up, he didn't finish it all the way, but he kind of pushed me up to the edge, and they gave him 1 point in overtime. So he beat me in overtime 3-2, but the gap was, it was closing. And so that was the 4th time I'd lost to him, Ryan. And then he went on to make the world team that year. He got 4th in the world, and really should have got the bronze. He was wrestling a guy from Turkey in Turkey.
Uh-oh.
And so it was really, the deck was stacked against him in that match. And, but he ended up getting 4th place, which was great because he qualified our weight class, 76 kilos, for the Olympic Games. So I'm really thankful, for Joe Williams for doing that.
Yeah. And
then I had him in the national finals in 2000, which, that's a picture of that. That's a painting of that match. Yeah.
I watched that match. I didn't realize, just how much distance you had created, because the match really wasn't that close. And, I'm watching the match. I'm thinking, did they have push out rules back then? Because if they did, you would have got a lot, because you did a lot of doubles. We just blast people off. But so before you closed the gap in 99, were they always pretty close and competitive matches?
No, the first time I wrestled him, I believe it was an Iowa duel. I didn't even come close to taking him down, or never really rode him. I mean, he was really explosive getting out from the bottom. And there wasn't, I clearly got escape points, but I didn't really sniff a takedown against him that first time. The second time I felt a little bit more comfortable. The 3rd time I wrestled him in the NCAA finals, I did not listen to Coach Reyna very well. He said that I need to be really patient, because Joe is a great counterattacker. I mean, he typically doesn't come out and shoot 8 times. He allows people to attack him, and then he counterattacks. He's one of the best counterattackers of all time. Period. So Coach Reyna was like, hey, let's just be really patient, kind of be like a patient sniper, and, don't take the shot unless it's really, really, really there. And let's allow this match to go into 2nd period, 3rd period, and if there's opportunity at the very end, or clearly you take into overtime, that's the time to really pick it up on him. But that was the advice from Coach Reyna. But I think I just got really excited. You run up on the stage at the NCAA tournament, they announce your name, Brendan Slade, and you run out there and you get up on the stage, and, there's 18,000 people screaming for you. And so the whole entire strategy, I punted, on first down, and, I went out and got really aggressive and started attacking him. And clearly, he counterattacks me, takes me down. I get in a hole, which is what happens with Joe Williams. You get behind, and then you have to start attacking because you're behind, and then you're feeding right into his game plan. So I wasn't that coachable that match. But then the 4th time I wrestled him, I began to be a lot more patient, And I think that patience ultimately paid off.
Yeah, he's like a sniper just waiting for a mistake, and then he'll go. I got to think Coach Gable was probably frustrated a number of times because you never really saw him open up to that, quote unquote Iowa style where he's just going. But, everyone has their own system, and that was his.
Yeah, that match, I mean, to kind of get back to that match that you were asking about, is I think what happened is we got there on the edge, and, my plan wasn't to try to front headlock him. We didn't talk about that, but I got in a front headlock right there on the edge, and, gut wrench is one of my best moves. And I had a tight front headlock, and I just thought, man, I'm right here on the edge. I'm just going to take the risk. And, I went for it, and I got the 2 points. And so again, then me having the lead changed things. So then when I'm up 2-0 and I have the lead, then it was okay to take more risk because I had the lead. And so there was a situation where we were kind of wrestling there in the center, and I snapped him and he reached. And so I snapped post, and I was able to level change and kind of get some good handles on the back of his legs. And then of course, I'm from Texas. I played middle linebacker and nose guard in football, and you get in like on a tackle like that, you're just taught to run your feet, right? Run. So, I ran him as far as I possibly could run him to make sure I secured that point. Thankfully he landed on his, on his elbows, and back then feet to back was 3 points. So, I got ahead 5-0. And then again, that's a totally different match. I'm not used to being ahead of Joe Williams 5-0. And then he was in the hole. So then he had to come to me. And then we started coming to me. That allowed me to just head block, control the center, put him on the edge a lot. And I was finally in the driver's seat in that match, which, looking back on it, I would much rather win that match, Ryan, and be 1-4 against him, win that match than the other 3, truthfully, because by winning that match, that put me in the finals of the Olympic trials in 2000. And then, Joe Williams had to go through the mini tournament with Sean Bourmet, Steve Marinetti, Brian Dolph, who ended up clearly beating Joe. And then I had to end up wrestling my college wrestling coach, my assistant college wrestling coach, in the finals to make the Olympic team, which is a whole nother story.
Wow. So that's the thing that I love about the story. The stakes were super high. I mean, this is April of the Olympic year, almost the exact same time we're in right now. And so you come into the U.S. Open that year as the 7th seed. You've wrestled Joe in the finals. You win that match. I mean, how many people do you think would have predicted that you would be, on that Olympic team going into it?
I don't think most people would have predicted that. Most people would have thought Joe Williams was going to be on the team. Again, he was 4th in the world the year before. As you know, he's one of the most successful American wrestlers of all time. So I think, the odds would have been on him to make the team, but that's why we have sport, and that's why we have to wrestle the matches. But from my perspective, I really believed I could beat him. It wasn't just like, man, I hope I can. Like, I really believed I could beat him, because you got to remember, again, the last time I wrestled him, we went to overtime. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm right there. This guy's 4th in the world, really should have been 3rd in the world. And then I lost him in overtime. So I think this is where it's really important as an athlete, kind of your self-talk and what you deeply believe in your heart and mind. I believed that because Joe Williams was 3rd or 4th in the world and I lost him in overtime, then that's where I was. And so I saw myself that way, and I wrestled that way. I trained that way. I believed that that's who I could be. So then going into that match, I really believed I could beat him. If, again, I was coachable and I listened to my coaches and I wasn't overly aggressive and I was patient and I finally wasn't stubborn. I finally listened to my coaches, and being coachable paid off that match.
Yeah, and that was just the first of many icons you would knock off that summer. Before we get to your Olympic trials run in the Olympics, take me back to spring of 99. You graduate from Penn. I think it was 99, 98, somewhere in there.
1998, yep.
98. So what do you do from graduating to 2000? Are you training at Penn?
No, I moved out to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Being from Amarillo, Texas, just kind of grew up in the South, Southwest. I'd put my 5 years into the Northeast. So I was really ready to head back home. I love the mountains. I love snow skiing. And so I was really excited. It's no offense to Penn or Philadelphia, but at that stage of my life, I was excited, to head out west. And I was really excited to move to the Olympic Training Center. And Bruce Burnett was the national coach at that period of time. And Bruce had been my cadet world team coach a couple times. So I'd had a existing relationship with him. So I was excited to move there. I was excited to wrestle under Bruce Burnett. And then thankfully, the same time I was coming in to move at the Olympic Training Center to be a resident athlete there, they hired Kevin Jackson to be the resident coach. So Kevin Jackson became, my personal coach there. And so he coached me those 2 years as I was, training for Sydney.
What is a day in the life like living at the Olympic Training Center as a resident athlete?
Well, I would tell you it was a lot easier than a day as a student athlete at Penn. When you have 4 or 5 classes, right? And you're meeting at the football stadium to run sprints, intervals, mile warm up, 2 400s, 6 200s, 10 100s, right? And then you go to eat breakfast, and then you go to class all day. Then you come back and train, right, in the afternoon, and then you go back and study. So being a student athlete at Penn, I would say life was a lot more challenging. And then when I got out to the Olympic Training Center, I was like, all I have to do now is just lift weights and wrestle. That's it. So, relatively speaking, it was really kind of a breath of fresh air where I could really zone in and focus on my strength and conditioning, to really focus on the technical aspects that I knew that I needed to improve upon if I was going to be the national champion, if I was going to make the Olympic team. And then if I was going to beat this guy named Saitiev, I knew that there was a lot of work that needed to be done. Just to reverse back a little bit, in 1996, I'm in Atlanta. I'm there. I'm in the stands. I'm watching Saitiev win the gold medal, watching him beat Kenny Monday. And as I'm sitting there looking at this guy, I believe he was 21 that summer. We're both the same age. He was 21. I was 21. I'm sitting up there in the stands as a third year at Penn, looking at this guy going, if I'm going to be Olympic champion, that's the guy I'm going to have to beat. So I knew when I got to the Olympic Training Center that there was just going to have to be some changes that were going to take place in my life. And being there really gave me the focus to get zoned in to make those changes.
And what were they? Were they technical? Were they conditioning? And
yeah, I think there was a technical piece for me because Brian Dolph was my coach, assistant coach in college. Brian Dolph is very technical. He's really great at controlling the tie with the underhook, snap hooks. Like training with him all those years, I developed a snap hook. I developed an aggressive hand fight. Like I really liked hand fighting, digging underhooks, being physical with my hands. But I did not learn how to attack from space as well as I needed to. And so, again, I felt like I had the hand fighting game. I was pretty solid there, but I needed to learn how to level change and blow through people from space. And then again, I'm thankful to God for this. He happened to give me a coach in Kevin Jackson who was really great at that. So, Brian Dolph taught me how to snap hook and hand fight and wrestle in tight. And then when I spent those 2 years with Kevin Jackson, he did a great job of teaching me how to create motion, to punch, fake, get the guy to reach and level change, and blow through guys with my double leg.
And so were you competing a lot when you were at Colorado, or just locking in and training for months on end?
Well, you don't compete to the same level when you, let's call it, become a professional. When you get out of college and become a pro, you don't wrestle. It's not like the Big Ten schedule, right? You're wrestling dual meets and tournaments all the time. It's not like that. You may only wrestle, 4 or 5 tournaments a year, and there wasn't dual meets. Like you would wrestle in, maybe a tournament in November, December, like the NYC. Then you'll wrestle maybe in the Schultz tournament at the end of January. You might wrestle in maybe an international tour in February, March. And then you're going into the U.S. Open in April, right? And the plan is clear to win the Nationals, make the World Team, and wrestle in the World Championships. And then it starts back over again with the NYC in November. And so you really don't compete as much. And there's a lot more time spent, I think, on developing clearly your skill set, because a lot of wrestlers, as we know, American wrestlers, they spend 4 or 5 years wrestling folk style. So there has to be this transition of like, I'm not wrestling folk style. They don't, at the Olympic Games, they don't take folk style. All they take is freestyle and Greco-Roman. So there's this transition that you have to clearly become much more skilled in your parterre game, offensively, turning people, and then almost more importantly, not getting turned. Because if you get somebody who's really, really good on top of you and you don't know what you're doing, they can tech you. So you have to spend time really maximizing your parterre knowledge. And then there's a whole element of studying your opponents, right?
Yeah.
And so I started studying opponents like Saitiev and Leopold and Adam Barakat from Turkey and Moon from Korea. I started studying those wrestlers, 2 years before I wrestled in the Olympic Games. So you really become a student of the sport. I said, because you have time to do that. No longer was I a student in the classroom. So I had that margin time to be a student of the sport.
And the one thing I wanted to ask you about before we get back to the matches, you were someone who was, as a physical athlete, chiseled, Brandon Slay. You were jacked compared to, if you look at you and Saitiev, you're like, come on, man. Like, the one guy looks like he's maybe a poet, and then you look like a middle linebacker.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what was your lifting routine? Were you doing kettlebells? Were you doing like Olympic movements? What did that look like?
Mostly Olympic movements. I did a lot of power cleans. And so our coach, Rob Wagner at Penn, was he was a phenomenal strength and conditioning coach, and he was a successful power lifter in his own right. Got squatted, I think, like 850 pounds, and he weighed like 195, right? He's just he had a lot of knowledge, and I felt like I had a really solid strength program in college. And what happened at the Olympic Training Center, I got out there and I got on their program for the first, 8 or 9 months. And no disrespect to their program over 20 years ago, but as I got on that program, I just realized I didn't have the same gains. I didn't have the same confidence in my strength. So I just asked them, I said, hey, no disrespect, but I'd really like to get back on the program that I had in college. I called Coach Wagner. I said, hey, would you mind putting together a strength conditioning program for me out here in Colorado Springs? Thankfully, he took the time to do that. So I got back on that program, and then I just started really getting strong. And that was a lot. I did a lot of power cleans, a lot of explosive movement, which for me, doing a double leg, you get on a double leg, just pulling your head up, your back straight, your hips in. Those power cleans and those hang cleans were a big part of my, I think, my power.
Yeah, I mean, you could see it. And that's why when I look at the match with Joe, a lot of people say Joe has one of the best reshot blast doubles there is. But I mean, you have one of the best doubles there is. So that was really interesting to see kind of you two going at it, and just, man, what a tournament for you, the 2000 US Open. And so after you win that, I got to think that's a huge turning point for your confidence and for your game moving forward. You had, call it 2 months, 6 weeks till the Olympic trials. What was your, I guess not was your mindset, but what were your expectations of who you might wrestle in the finals of the Olympic trials?
After the nationals, it was just, the first thing was really special for me as a born and raised Texan. I think I was the first person from Texas ever to become a national champ in the US Open.
Yeah.
And outstanding wrestler. So I just right there, that moment as a Texan, that was really special. Right. And I share that with you. I don't share that with you to brag at all, but to connect to this next point is that the Olympic trials coming up, as you talked about, happened to be in Dallas, Texas. Right. Yeah. So I was taking that success in Vegas of winning the national tournament. And then I knew that the Olympic trials for the very first time ever, I think, were in the state of Texas. And then I just happened to be the only Texan in the whole entire tournament. So, here you are, I knew I was in the finals already. So I was either going to be on the Olympic team, right, or the alternate, but I was thinking making the Olympic team. But that was just really special to be a Texan in Dallas, Texas. And I think I had about 400 people from Amarillo, my hometown, drive down to Dallas, and they're in the stands with, they had these like Slay 624 shirts on, which is kind of a play on Austin, 316. But the 624, that was the date, June 24th. And so what they're pretty much saying is like, Slay, I believe you can do it today. And, to have them up in the stands cheering for me, and there's a bunch of kids, took their shirts off and, painted Slay, SLAY and stood together and they were cheering. And so that was a really special moment as a Texan to be in Texas and seeking to make the Olympic team and accomplish my dream. It was it was a really special weekend, clearly a really special day.
Yeah. And you win it against your coach. Tell us a little bit about Brian Dolph. And again, another guy I don't know a ton about just outside of the research I've done for this, but yeah, it must have been unique wrestling your coach in the Olympic trial finals.
That's an understatement, Ryan. Talk about Brian Dolph. He was an NCAA champion, I believe, in 1990 for the University of Indiana. And Jim Humphrey, Reese Humphrey's father, Jim was his coach. Jim, I think, is one of the best technicians I've ever been around. He infused that knowledge into Brian Dolph. I think Brian Dolph is one of the best technicians I've ever been around. So what an honor to have a guy like that as your assistant coach in college. And then don't forget, he was actually training out Foxcatcher, way before I got there. So he'd spent all this time training with Dave Schultz and training with Valentin Jordanov and training with John Gira, and training with all these, international guys that would come out to Foxcatcher. And so to be able to work with him, for that period of time was huge for me. And again, it wasn't just folk style. I mean, Brian Dolph had tons of freestyle skills as well. So to be able to have him as a coach and a training partner, I would say was just instrumental in my success. And I really believe this. I would not have been an NCAA finalist if it wasn't for him, All-American. I would not have been an Olympic champion. It wasn't for Brian Dolph. Just his technique, his grit, the fight that he brought to the wrestling room that he taught us was really important. And the truth is, a majority of my time at Penn, when he was coaching me, he beat the dog out of me. When he came in, it was my second year as a sophomore. When he came in as our assistant coach, my second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, majority of the time, he just whooped me. So when you go like, oh my gosh, I'm graduating from college, and now the very first time I wrestled him was the Dave Schultz tournament. The very first inaugural Dave Schultz International tournament, the very first real match I had against Dolph. I'm just thinking, man, most of the time I've wrestled this guy before I walked out there on the mat, I'm like, he's beat me. But, thankfully I started picking up that game from being able to attack from space like we'd spoken about earlier. And I was able to beat him that match. And so I was 1-0 against him. And then in 1999, the very first match of the World Team Trials in 1999, Brian Dolph and I draw each other. First match. And he ends up beating me 1-0. It was a 9-minute. It was not a barn burner. It was really a snap hook fest. We sit there and both tried to snap hook each other for 9 minutes. And he beat me 1-0. Because back then you had to have 3 points in regulation. And if somebody didn't have 3 points, you went to overtime. So it was 1-0. We wrestled 3 more minutes and he ended up beating me 1-0. And so I was 1-1 against him. Right. So then in 2000, when he ends up upsetting Joe Williams.
What happened in that match?
He ended up getting Joe put down. He was really, he dug some hooks on him. He challenged him with like an inside trip. And so he got Joe kind of called for being passive. Mm-hmm. So back then, if somebody was being passive, they would say, hey, do you want to keep him on his feet or do you want to put him down? And so Dolph chose to put Joe down, and he ended up gut wrenching him 3 times. He got ahead 6-0. And so that was wow. He and back then actually he gut wrenched him. He held him for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You had to score some form of another point back then. Nowadays you can do as many gut wrenches and leg laces as you want. But back then, if you gut wrenched a guy, you had to have some form of another point, which could be a leg lace or a hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the extra hold point. So Dolph gut wrenched him, held him, gut wrenched him, held him, gut wrenched him, held him, and he ended up getting a real solid lead on Joe, and Joe wasn't able to come back and beat him. So then I was thinking I'd spent 90% of my time planning on wrestling Joe Williams in the Olympic trials. That's what I envisioned. That's what I thought about. I believe that's what's going to happen. And now I'm like, I'm going to have to wrestle. I'm 1-1 against Dolph. Majority of the time we wrestle in college, right? He whooped me. So that was the guy I was going to have to wrestle to make the Olympic team, which is really surreal because I really cared about him. Again, he was my coach. He was my friend. He was a mentor. And so for that to be my opponent in a best 2 out of 3 series that would decide whether I accomplished my lifelong athletic dream of making the Olympic team was, it was emotional. I think that's the best way to put it. It was really an emotional time.
And it's good to hear you say that because as I watched it yesterday on YouTube, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, Dolph beat Joe, but, Dolph was Brandon's coach. Brandon probably had it in the bag, but going into it, it wasn't anything where it was guaranteed at all.
No, because there was just a lot of, as it is in our country now, there's a lot of depth back then. There's a lot of depth now, but you think back in that weight class, I think there were like 8 NCAA champions and finalists that were all vying for the number 1 spot. I mean, Brian Dolph was NCAA champ. Joe Williams was a 3-time NCAA champ. Steve Marinetti was NCAA champ. Darrell Weber was NCAA champ. Sean Bourmet was second in the NCAAs, right, to Pat Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Smith won his fourth. I was second in the NCAAs. So, I mean, that weight class was just, stacked with proven performers. And so whoever came out of that went through the gauntlet. And for Dolph, I'm pretty sure, if I think back, I think he beat Steve Marinetti, and then that put him into the match against Joe Williams. So he beat Marinetti, he beat Joe Williams. So you got to realize, like, he's peaking at the right time. Like, these weren't fluke wins. I mean, he wrestled really well, and he was 33 years old. I was 24 years old. He had a lot of experience. But the flip side, I also saw it, and it's no disrespect to Brian, I also saw it as that I'm 24, so I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm stronger than I've ever been. I did not go through the mini tournament. I didn't have to wrestle those 3, rigorous matches. And he did. He finally makes the finals. He's got a black eye. Like, he's 33. I guarantee he was sore. He was feeling it. And I saw that as confidence for me, realizing that I was fresh, and explosive and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, and it showed. You looked good out there in those matches. I think you won the first one, 5-2, 6-2, and then the second
5-2.
one really 5-2, really controlled it as well. And I just want to go back to some of the names you're mentioning. I forgot that Marinetti was on the world team in '98. Bourmet had beaten Adam Saitiev. Who did Bourmet lose to in the trials? Do you know?
I can't remember now, but I just also remember Dan St. John was also in that weight class, and he was the world team member in 1997. Marinetti was the world team member in 1998. Joe Williams was the world team member in 1999, right? And Dan St. John was the NCAA champion as well. So there's another one, right? Yeah. So that weight class, Tony Roby was in there. He was second in the NCAAs to Joe Williams in 1997. Jason Kraft was in that weight class. It was just when you hit the quarterfinals at the U.S. Open, when you hit the quarterfinals, like, you're going to wrestle an NCAA champ in the quarters. Mm-hmm. And it was a tough weight class back then. And I think all in all that another interesting point is that particular weight class in our country has, I think, been one of the most successful weight classes that our country's has. I mean, if you look at Dave Schultz winning the gold in '84, Kenny Monday win the gold in '88, Kenny Monday won the silver in '92. And in 1996, Kenny made the team again, lost to Saitiev, no medal there. But 2000, for me to win the gold. And then clearly there's the guy came along in 2011 named Jordan Burroughs that's done really well at that weight class. So if you think about how many medals have been won just from 84 to 2020, like that 36 years, we've won a lot of medals at that 74 to 76 kilos. And if you say, like, why is that? And, my theory is that's kind of the average weight class for a man, that's in great shape. I mean, most guys the average, I think, height is 5'8", about 175. Yeah. So I think that we just have a lot of guys that kind of fit that size. And I think our country's done a great job developing that weight class.
Yeah, it is super competitive when you look at it that way. I mean, even for Kenny Monday to make the team in '96 against a very game Pat Smith, I mean, a lot of people probably thought Pat, Kenny kind of came out of retirement late, so Pat was looking like the guy, and a lot of people thought maybe he would go on for a couple more years, but it just turned out that it was just this loaded kind of melting pool of studs from all kinds of different schools, not just the power schools. So you make it. Before we go on to the Olympics, what's your fondest memory of that Olympic trials in 2000?
My fondest memory was right after I made the team. There was just this pure joy, just exuberation, that came after me. I was never somebody that ever planned, hey, after you win, you're going to act like this. You're going to do this fist pump or whatever. Like, I never did that. I visualized myself getting my hand raised, but I wouldn't visualize what type of feelings or like a celebration I would do. I never did that. So when I made the team, I just know in my heart of hearts, that was just pure elation. That was just pure joy I had. And I remember just like thrusting both of my fists in the air and just like, just all I think, just this almost catharsis, this cleansing of the emotions of starting wrestling when you're 6 years old. And then, you make the Olympic team 18 years later, and how many times I've thought about that. And again, we're not to the Olympics yet, but you don't get to go to the Olympics unless you make the team. So that was a huge step. And then I think to listen to the crowd back then. And again, I never wrestled for applause. That wasn't my motive. But when people stood up and started, cheering, and I looked up, in my section where all of my family and, friends were, they're screaming. And one of my fondest memories as well is that I actually was more nervous about having to speak in front of the whole entire arena than I was my second match to make the team. People kind of asked me about, hey, did you get nervous in that second match? I said, actually, I kept going out to check, like when, Kerry Coleup made the team or Lincoln McRae made the team. I'd say, did they interview them? I'm like, nope, no interview. I'm like, woo, they're not going to have to like talk to me in front of like, whatever, 12,000 people, I think. And so like, I didn't think I was going to be interviewed. And once I made the team, they gave me this little American flag, and I was going to take my little American flag and, run out of the arena. And all of a sudden I hear Jeff Blacknick walking up the stairs, like boom, 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 boom. And he's like, hey, Brandon. I was like, no. He's like, can you come over here? And I was like, oh, and I was like, oh my gosh. My heart started beating faster, I think, at that moment than it was when I was wrestling. And I'm just thinking, what the heck is this guy going to ask me? And he ended up asking me, kind of where I draw my strength from. And I'd actually never been public with my faith. So that was really special for me, just to say that, I'm a Christian. I draw my faith from my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And it was really special for me because it gave me the opportunity to thank everybody. Hey, thank you for coming to support me. Thank you for everything you've done. And I think that opportunity of gratitude to my support system, that just meant a lot to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a culmination. And one of the people I'm sure you had some gratitude for was your parents. And I thought it was interesting that your dad played football for Bear Bryant.
Yeah.
What kind of a guy was he? Was he a hard ass? Was he just a softie? I mean, what was he?
He's a big softie. My dad, growing up, we had Alabama stuff all over the house. There was ceramic elephants, because that was kind of their unspoken mascot, was the elephant. But, they were the Crimson Tide. I have tons of shirts with me with like, Alabama tank tops and stuff on when I was a kid. And of course, I didn't know who Bear Bryant was when I was 8, 9, 10, or 11. As I got older, though, I started learning more just what a legendary coach he was. And then I started learning how special that was, that my dad had the opportunity to play in the Sugar Bowl for him. That, my dad never told me this. My dad wrestled at Trinidad Junior College. I knew he wrestled there, but he never told me that he was he was a junior college All-American. He never told me that. I had to find that out like way later, right? So as I got older, I realized how special that was for my father, kind of to have that success. And, my dad, he began, I think, being a hard ass when I was 6 or 7. He was coming in the room trying to coach me at the YMCA, the local YMCA boys club in Amarillo. He was wanting to get in there and get involved. And I didn't like him correcting me every single time. I just wanted to go there and have fun and play king of the mat. Mm-hmm. Like stop correcting me and stop telling me I'm doing all these things wrong. And I remember one particular day, I just lost it on him. And I just pointed at the door. I was like, get out of here. And my dad was like, okay. And at that moment, he turned around, walked out, and went and started drinking coffee with the dads. And my dad never coached me again.
Wow.
From that point on, he allowed my coaches to be my coach. And he was my dad, meaning when I won, he gave me a big hug. When I lost, he gave me a big hug. When I won, he praised me. When I lost, he put his arm around me and told me it was going to be okay. So I think I look at not judging fathers that they get so dang involved in their kids' sporting careers, but I'm so thankful that I had a dad that was my dad. Mm-hmm. And he allowed everybody else to be my coach, because I think I started falling in love with the sport because of that. And I didn't feel pressure, and anxiety from my dad, like over the top of me all the time. He was just, he was just there loving me regardless of what happens. And that freed me up, Ryan. That freed me up to just compete, because he made it really clear that do not wrestle for me. He said, don't wrestle for me. Don't wrestle for your grandmother. Don't wrestle for your friends. Like, if you're going to do this, you do this because you want to wrestle. Like, you enjoy this. I'll take you to every dang tournament you want to go to, but you better do it because you want to do it. Don't do it for me. And once I realized, like, cool, right? There's no pressure from you. I'm not doing it for you. I mean, next thing I know, like I'm wrestling my 5th year, 6th year, 7th year, 8th year, 9th year. And then, the rest is history.
What a relief that is, just to hear you even say that. The freedom you must have felt competing with that kind of mentality.
Yeah. And, I think about the NCAA tournaments. My dad, he would drive my grandmother to the NCAA tournaments, but he was just up there supporting me. He never said one thing about not 1 ounce of technique when I was at the NCAA tournaments. In the nationals, Olympic trials, Olympics, my dad didn't say one thing about technique. He just, again, kept telling me that he believed in me, that he loved me, and that, and he just kept telling me how proud he was of me all the time. And again, I would just say that just depositing all that in my heart, it just allowed me to compete with a lot more freedom.
Man, that's powerful. And it's, we're not going to get a chance to hit on your NCAA career here today, but man, you talk about another just example of perseverance, the ups and downs, and that in itself is a whole crap. It's even a documentary, it could be. So maybe we can hit on that in subsequent conversations, but let's get to the meat of this thing. Sydney Olympics. Yeah. I can still see the Opera House, in my mind from one of the, commercials showing the Sydney landscape, or the cityscape. So you get there. What do you remember from the Village?
What I remember from the Village was that it was loud and that there were a lot of athletes, that wrestling was the last 3 days of the Olympics, which means we had to stay focused for that whole entire time leading up to it. And what I remember is that there were athletes getting done on the first day, second day, third day, fourth day. And of course, they're done with their Olympic competition. So, they're loud. It's kind of chaotic there. And I would say as somebody that wanted to stay ultra focused, I didn't like it. I clearly didn't go to the Olympics to party. Mm-hmm. I went to the Olympics to be an Olympic champion, and I needed the environment around me to fit that goal that I had. And so I ended up contacting the leadership of USA Wrestling and Rich Bender and Jim Shear. And I ended up saying, like, this is not working. I don't feel comfortable staying here. It's just too kind of loud and chaotic. This is a business trip for me. And I remember sharing that with them, and I'm so thankful to them. They end up finding a couple suites about 2 blocks away from Darling Harbor where we competed. And they end up getting those rooms for us. And so Kerry McCoy stayed there, Lincoln McElravy stayed there, and I stayed there. And I would tell you that changed everything for me because it was quiet. I woke up, I got to sleep later because all I had to do was walk 2 blocks to the arena, where at the Village, we actually had to get on a boat, right? Get on a ferry and take the ferry to Darling Harbor and get off. And the time sometimes would change. Sometimes it would come 5 minutes late, 7 minutes late. It was kind of a crapshoot. You didn't know for sure when you were going to get there all the time, which I didn't like that either. Like, I wanted to know if it's leaving at 8:30, it's leaving at 8:30. So being able to stay in the suite a couple blocks away from the arena, Ryan, was huge for me. And again, it eliminated those distractions and got me really focused on the task at hand.
So how long would you say you were there in the Village before you got out of that situation?
I'm thinking I was there maybe a week.
And it was just that crazy. People are partying, having fun.
Yeah, it's just loud. You could hear them at nighttime, coming in, and because there was it was building after building after building. And so all these other teams, I'm not going to name names of people, but all these other teams would come in. It was just kind of loud and chaotic. And again, we as wrestlers we weren't doing any of that because we hadn't competed yet, and we weren't going to compete until that, September 28th, 29th, and 30th, which was, again, that was the last 3 days of the Olympics. So we needed to focus. Again, I just want to praise USA Wrestling and, Rich Bender and Jim Shear for listening to us, not just me, listening to us on that and realizing this is a lifetime dream for these guys. And we want to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. So that was huge.
Yeah, and you talk about the other guys you're with. I got to imagine, I know Lincoln McElravy, he's all business. He's a quiet guy. Kerry McCoy, Colat, he's freaking nails, just laser focused. And you guys are cutting weight this whole time. So it's not really that enjoyable to wait till the end for the Olympics. During the buildup, did you see Saitiev walking around at all?
No, I never saw him until the weigh-ins. And I remember when we made weight, though, he looked at me, and I think he thought probably he was gonna have to wrestle Joe Williams again. I think that's what happens. Some of these foreign guys, they look and go like, well, who was the American last year? And they just sometimes think that's going to be the person. And I don't really think he knew who I was or if he had studied me, because I think he was just like, well, I'm going to win this thing. Nobody's going to beat me. I'm sure he was confident in that. But when I got on the scale and stood next to him, I think he realized, oh my gosh, this is a different guy. Yeah. And I think he may have started having some second thoughts.
It goes back to like the 6 and under tournaments where you size someone up on the scale, you're like, God, that guy looks so big. But I can remember my mom or dad telling me they're the same size as you. And I'm thinking, no way. But I mean, that match with Joe and Saitiev from 99, I'm sure you watch it a bunch. Is that where you saw your window for that double A? Because Joe hit him with a double early in that match off the mat. Yeah,
not just that match, but if you watched about 20 matches of Saitiev, which I did, more than that, the areas that you saw him get scored on were people blowing through him on a double leg, because he's tall and lanky, and sometimes he would stand tall, so people would blast through him sometimes. I mean, I think there was one guy from maybe Senegal wrestling one time and just double legged him right off the bat, and then he came back before there was a tech rule, beat the guy by like 30 points or something. But you start seeing these opportunities where people score on him by like level changing and just blasting through him. And so you're like, you take note, right?
Yeah.
Take note of that. And then you would see him get gut wrenched sometimes. And again, if you look at him, I mean, he's not a big muscular guy. Like I used to think if I can get my arms locked around him, I'm going to snap his rib cage. Like I'm going to take every ounce of oxygen out of him I can. And so seeing him get gut wrenched, seeing him get double legged, again, you're taking notes. And then it was worked out great for me because my number one move on my feet was a double leg, and my number one move in parterre was a gut wrench, right? So I think I particularly matched up really well against Saitiev based on my strengths compared to what his kryptonite was.
Yeah, you think about your parterre at the time was just, I mean, I've never seen someone hit gut so consistently, whether it was against Joe or Saitiev. And I know you were a big Greco guy, and I'm sure there's some roots with the Greco gut wrench there. So when the tournament started, did you wrestle all the matches in one day? Like, what was the format?
No, you made weight on Wednesday. We wrestled 2 matches on Thursday, 2 matches on Friday, and then the finals were on Saturday. So it was kind of like an NCAA tournament. We're like the NCAA tournament, you make weight on Wednesday, 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday, and finals on Saturday. So very similar. And again, you only make weight one time, which, I mean, again, I love that. So for me, I would walk around weighing, 182, 183, sometimes, up to 185. And so I was cutting down to 167.5, 76 kilos. So for me to make that weight, that was a big cut for me. And thankfully I did not have to make it every single day, because by the time I got to the finals, I remember I weighed myself. I weighed 184 pounds, in the finals. Wow. So thankfully, you didn't have to make weight every day, because that would have been a whole different, it makes it a different sport. It makes it when, there's 2 arguments. Some people are like, well, if you make weight every single day, then people aren't going to cut as much weight. People are always going to cut a certain amount of weight, right? If you make weight every single day, they say people won't cut as much weight. But the downside is, though, it makes people think about, I got to make weight. I can't have this. I can't have 2 bottles of water. I can only have 1 bottle of water. I can't have this whole entire sandwich. I can only have half of the sandwich, right? It just, you end up having to think about making weight, and it's great to just be done with it. I made weight, done. And that can just focus on wrestling. So, I'm a big fan of that, but clearly people that don't cut a lot of weight, that don't like to wrestle guys bigger than them, they'd love to make weight every day. So, but for me, that worked well for me.
Could you imagine now making weight 2 days in a row, scratch weight?
No. Well, I wouldn't have been able to wrestle probably 76 kilos.
No way.
Because, it was clearly legal back then, but you could use saunas, right? You could use sauna suits. So, I mean, clearly I wasn't cheating, but that was part of international wrestling. And if I couldn't have used a sauna suit or a sauna, it would have been, and had to make weight scratch every day. Like, I just don't think I could have gone 76 kilos. I think I would have had to make the decision to bulk up and try to make the team, at the upper weight class, which, that had Les Gutchess and Charles Burton. And, there's some tough hombres there.
For sure. So when you get to the match with Saitiev, what did I wanted to ask you, one of the questions I had written down was, what did his defense feel like? He looked very funky.
Yeah. Again, studying video again, and back to the whole coachable part is that Coach Jackson made it really clear that I did not need to shoot single legs on him, because when you shoot single legs on Saitiev, he scores 99% of the time. So shooting a single leg on him, or even a high crotch where he sit corner and cross lift you, is like really was a no-no. And so the game plan was don't attack unless it's a level change, blast him off his feet double leg. And I listened to that in the first 30 or 40 seconds. And then I veered from that strategy for the next, 4 minutes. And then that's when you see him, he got some takedowns and scored on me because I didn't stick to that strategy. And then when we went into overtime, thankfully I was like, okay, I need to, learn my lesson. No single legs. I'm only going to shoot in overtime, sudden victory if it's a double leg. And, thankfully he was kind of digging hook and he rose up. I just sensed him kind of just come up out of his stance a little bit. And right when I sensed him come up, that's when I level changed an outside step double legged him, which I'm really glad he rose up.
That was all she wrote, man. It was clear as day. You can see him when he hits the mat. He kind of lands on a split, and he's trying to maybe scoot around, and it's like it's over though, man. There's nothing you can say about it. I will say if I had to pick one thing that won the match, it's got to be that turn right away. Like when you turned him right away like that, I guarantee he wasn't expecting that. And that actually resulted in a little bit of a scramble where he reversed you, just again, showing how funky he was. I actually thought you touch followed him on that gut. Has anyone ever said that to you?
Lots of people have said that. And there's actually a photo that somebody took where his back is flat as a board on the mat. It's a great photo somebody took. But I'm really glad they didn't call the pin.
Yeah.
Because I think if they would have called the pin, if I double leg and gut wrenched him and they're like touch fall, then they would have been like, that's a fluke.
Yeah.
I think people would have been like, oh, Brandon Slay, he beats Saitiev. That what a fluke, right? They called the touch fall. So even though I do believe he was pinned, I think I did pin him. I'm glad they didn't call the pin. I'm glad we got to wrestle it out, because then, to go into overtime and take him down in overtime, then beating Saitiev, it wasn't a fluke. We wrestled the whole entire match. There were no funky calls.
No,
there was nothing subjective. We're like, oh, that was a bad call. Like it was objective match, objective takedowns. And, kind of go back to your point, this is what I'm coaching my wrestlers now at the PRTC, just how important a turn is. You don't just take a guy down and just lay on him and look at the ref and like bring you back on your feet. That your turns, that's a match separator. I mean, that separates you from your opponent, especially if you can get multiple turns, right? If you can catch a trap arm and you catch a leg lace and get multiple turns, I mean, that's how you tech guys and get off the mat quickly. But that turn, I think you're right, Ryan, that was a difference maker, because back then too, you got to remember the reason why it was really a difference maker is because we've talked about this already. You had to have the magical 3 points, right? And so by getting 3 points right off the bat, it's like, well, man, this match, if he has a lead, it's going to end in regulation. They're not going to go into overtime, right? Unless it's tied. It ended up becoming tied, and we went to sudden victory. But that turn was really important. And then, my goodness, like him catching my wrist. And when I popped him through, he caught my wrist. I couldn't get my arm out. So I had to just bail and give up the reversal. And then that was his first point on the board. So when we got back up on our feet, it's 3-1. And then I had to keep wrestling.
Yeah. You almost held him for a 5 count too, on the back there. It's just an awesome match. And like you said, that year also is when Rulon beat Karelin, but the end of the match is not really that satisfying for wrestling fans to understand unless you really know what's going on. So it was good to see your match end in just such a satisfying way where there was no funkiness. And we know that was the year where I don't really know what happened to Colat, but there was some real shenanigans going on. And so for nothing to happen in your match, 1, it was super rare, but 2, awesome that it happened.
Actually, you said there's nothing to happen, but I think here's a little backstory, which I know this is kind of why you do this podcast. People don't know these things, but nothing happened in the match. But back then, all you had to do was pay $500 to end up challenging the match, challenging the referee's decision.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is that after my match against Saitiev, I go back in the back. Like, I think I just beat Saitiev, right? I'm really excited about it. And Kevin Jackson came to me and said, hey, Brandon, they protested, they paid the money. They protested your match. They're going to go back there and they're going to rewatch the match. And just so you know, he looked at me, he's like, we know how international wrestling works. I need you to start getting yourself mentally ready to wrestle him again at about 45 minutes.
Stop it. What?
Truth.
Is that what happened
And
to Kolat?
It's exactly what happened to Kolat. So Kolat beat the Iranian, right? They protested the match. Again, $500. I mean, there was protests taking place left and right because you pay the money and who knows what's getting paid in the back. And so, they protested Kolat's match. They go back, they rescore it, right? And then Kolat had to wrestle that Iranian again about 45 minutes, an hour later. And of course, the Iranian, he'd already lost. So he had nothing to lose this match. And he throws the kitchen sink, at Kerry and ends up beating Kerry and, ends up losing. And, Kerry doesn't medal in the Olympic Games, which I totally believe he was peaking and he was had the potential to be the Olympic champion.
Yeah.
And so he went from the opportunity to be Olympic champion to getting a match protested, have to wrestle the same guy twice the same day and losing that match, which, I hate that for Kerry, but also know that when Kevin Jackson told me that you need to mentally prepare yourself to wrestle Saitiev again, like it wasn't like a joke. Like this, it's probably going to happen. You just beat Buvasa Saitiev and the Russians paid $500 to protest and they're going to go back and watch this. So Brandon, you need to get ready to wrestle him again.
I love how they put the 500 on like that's going to do anything at that level. Like what's $500 to anyone?
Well, anybody's willing to protest matches for that, right? I mean, if you had to pay like $10,000 to protest a match, well, then there would not be. And I think they've learned that now. But back then it was easy, right, for people to protest. So anyway, I'm getting myself mentally prepared, Ryan. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So I double legged him early. I gut wrenched him. I believe I can double leg him. I've double legged him twice, but on my gut wrench, I got to really make sure I drive all the way through. I don't want him to reverse me again, right? I'm starting to think about all this stuff. Do not shoot that dang single leg again. That's how he scored on you. Just get rid of the single legs, Brandon. Stay focused on your double leg. So again, I'm starting to think through all this stuff. And I'm visualizing wrestling him again, seeing myself get my hand raised again. I'm preparing myself, and Kevin Jackson thankfully comes in and goes, he's like, hey, you won the protest, you beat him. And I was just like, it's like, not that I was scared, but I was just excited that I'd have to go wrestle him again. And, just to connect this is that, I beat the guy from Kazakhstan the next day, and then I had the guy from Turkey in the semifinals. And then I beat the guy from Turkey.
I thought that was the semis. That wasn't the semis?
No, on first day I wrestled Bulgaria, match 1, Saitiev, match 2. That was the pool. I was in a pool of 3 guys. So you had to win your pool to advance. So Saitiev beats the Bulgarian, I beat the Bulgarian, and then whoever wins that match against Saitiev and I wins the pool and they advance. If I would have lost that match against Saitiev, I'd have been out of the tournament. No medal. That's why me beating him, he didn't win the pool, so he was out of the tournament. That's why he didn't win a medal. He didn't have a chance to win a medal because he did not win the pool. So back then there was like pools of 4, pools of 3, and you had to win the pool to advance. So I win the pool, and that 2 matches that day, Bulgarian, Saitiev. The next morning I have Kazakhstan in the quarterfinals, beat him, which is a whole nother match. I shot like 16 times. We went the full 9 minutes. It's 2-2. I end up winning a referee's decision because I shot so many times, I think.
Wow.
So I beat him, and then I go into the semifinals, and then I have the Turk. And the Turk, I end up beating him 3-1. But I share the story just to say I made the Olympic finals. There wasn't, I didn't get all excited about it. It was more just like, I'm in the Olympic finals. I go back to the warm-up area, Ryan. Kevin Jackson comes to me. He's like, hey, Brandon's going to let you know, Turkey protested the match. They're going to go back and rewatch that match. I need you to get yourself mentally ready to wrestle the Turk again. You're not in the Olympic finals yet, Brandon. So I'm like, okay. He tried to crotch lift me. I defended, I reversed him. I turned him on top. Again, I'm doing the same thing in the Saitiev match. What worked? What do I need to change? How can I be best prepared to beat him again to make the Olympic finals? Because this could potentially happen again. We know this. And thankfully, Kevin Jackson said, hey, you won the protest. You're in the Olympic finals, baby. And he comes in and we get excited because it's like, it's a done deal. I'm in the Olympic finals. And then clearly I had Alexander Leopold the next day.
Yeah. And I actually haven't watched that match because I wanted to ask you this question, but in the finals, you lose that match, you get a silver, you get back to Texas. What are you thinking? You get back to Texas, no one's around. You're finally back wherever you're living, Colorado, Texas.
Yeah.
And I watched this documentary this year called The Weight of Gold, or it's about the post-Olympic blues that athletes feel when they get home. What was your experience? Like 2 weeks after the Olympics, everything's died down. You're back to normal. Even before you've known even before you won the gold, like even as a silver medalist, did you feel any of those post-Olympic blues, or what was that transition like?
Well, I think if you haven't watched that match, I would just encourage you to watch it. It was a tough match to go through because they gave him all of his points, right? They cautioned me. They gave him 2 points after the clinch, 0-0.
Oh.
They say that I didn't let him lock his hands, though we're locked for 5 seconds. We're both locked.
And they gave 2 on that?
I gave me a caution, gave him 2 points. And because I was cautioned, I have to go down now. So he's on top trying to turn me, and I pull his hand away and I squeeze it. Now my grip's pretty strong, but not like break your hand strong. And I pull his hand away, and he's like, he starts screaming. The ref slaps my hand, gives me another caution, gives him another point, Ryan. So he's up 3-0. Again, magical 3 points, right? He had his 3 points. And now Leopold, who's one of the best defensive wrestlers of all times, has his 3 points. He doesn't have to do anything the rest of the match. And again, I got second caution. So where do I have to go? Back down. So I was down for probably 40 seconds of him trying to turn me. We have a little over a minute left in the match. I'm down 3-0. He has yet to take me down. He has yet to turn me. All 3 of his points were given to him off cautions. I've never been called for those cautions my whole entire wrestling career. So this isn't me making excuses at all. No. There's a lot to share on that, but I would just say that's how the Olympic finals, the biggest match of my life, was unraveling. And then there's about, 30 seconds. I'm down 3-0. I mean, I'm not just going to give up. So I kind of force a shot. I throw a Hail Mary. He blocks me. That's the 1 point he scored on me, which I wouldn't have taken that shot if I wasn't behind 3-0.
Right.
And so he wins 4-0. He does his little flip. He gets his gold medal.
How are you feeling afterwards?
I'm the silver medalist. At first, to be honest with you, there's a lot of anger. I was thinking about, they protested my Saitiev match. They're protesting my semifinals match. And oh, by the way, you know what the only match you can't protest at the Olympics is?
Finals?
The finals. Can't protest the finals because they'd say they don't have time to go back, rewatch the match because the medal ceremony takes place quickly. Yeah. So you can't protest the finals. So we didn't have the opportunity to pay our $500 to protest that match. So there's a lot of anger, I would say, immediately. Mm-hmm. Anger at the refs, just surreal, Twilight Zone. Is this really happening? You got to remember, after beating Joe Williams, right? Being the national champ, making the Olympic team, beating Saitiev, right? I mean, there was just a lot of great stuff. And then for my Olympic finals match to just kind of unravel and be kind of so ugly, that was tough at first. I'm going to be really candid. There was anger, there was frustration.
Even once you got back to the States, you're feeling that?
Yeah, but on the word stand, you'd see I was frustrated. But after I got drug tested, I didn't think anybody would be outside. I thought I was going to walk back to the apartment because it was 2 hours later. And I walk outside of Darling Harbor Arena, Ryan, and there was about 40 people, all my family, all my friends that came to watch me. They were all, standing outside, just telling me how much they love me, how proud they are of me. And that's when I realized I had a lot of anger inside of me, but I walked out and I was like, you know what? This is what's really important in life. Mm-hmm. This support system, the friends and the family and the love I have, this is what life is really all about. And at that moment, my heart just really softened and I realized I need to be thankful. I got second in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted the gold, but didn't happen. Nothing I can do about it now. Can't protest the finals. I have an Olympic silver medal around my neck. And I had to realize there's more to life than just wrestling. There's more to life than gold medals. And my heart changed even that night. And there was a lot of gratitude that came. And I took that back to Amarillo, Texas. I started speaking to schools with my silver medal, started telling people there's more to life than gold medals, right? That it's about, your character and how you treat other people and giving full effort. I just started sharing all that, from my heart. And then we end up, hearing that one of the Olympic champions in freestyle wrestling had tested positive, but we didn't know which one.
How long after is all this happening?
That was about 3 weeks later.
Wow.
So, I was a silver medalist for 3 weeks, I didn't think, I thought I was always going to be, the silver medalist. So we hear that somebody, and I was like, well, it's not Leopold. Look at him. He didn't take steroids and he's a wily veteran. I don't think he would have done that. But then I got a call. I think it was 2 days after we kind of heard somebody tested positive. They called me and said, hey, Brandon, this is so-and-so from the International Olympic Committee. We wanted to let you know that Alexander Leopold tested positive for nandrolone. He was 20 times over the limit. We've wiped his name clean from the Olympics. We've taken his medal away, and you're the new 2000 Olympic champion. And I think he thought I was going to be like really excited. And oddly enough, I was like, what? And I was like, my first thought was that I wanted to wrestle him for it. I didn't want that just kind of like, now you can have the gold. I was more of like, is there any way that we can compete? I was asking this guy, like, is there any way we could wrestle again for it? Maybe do some type of like pay-per-view or something, like to get people to watch, because like I wanted to wrestle him again, especially based on what happened in the Olympic finals, right? I wanted to wrestle him again. And finally, like I'm bartering back and forth with this guy, and he finally goes like, Mr. Slay, would you like the gold medal, or not? Like, I think he's getting frustrated with me. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'll take it. And they planned a new gold medal ceremony on the Today Show, where they brought the guy from Turkey over who went from 4th to 3rd. By the way, he was the most excited that morning because he went from having no medal, right? Yeah. 4th place to getting 3rd place. So brought the Turk over to get the 3rd. The Korean gets the silver, and I get the gold. And Al Roker from the Day Show is holding our medals, and Matt Lauer and Katie Couric, they were the host at that period of time. So I had a chance to do an interview with them and get the gold medal and in Rockefeller Square in Manhattan. And all my family, my grandma had never been to Manhattan. She'd never stayed at the Waldorf Astoria. She'd never been in a limousine. So I got to take Meemaw Slay all around Manhattan in the limo. So it was just a wonderful, it was a wonderful day.
Wow. What a crazy journey. I mean, even if you start in spring of 2000, but really, if you go back to, like 94, when your first time at the nationals at the NCAAs, and then that kind of roller coaster, just to get to that, there's so many ups and downs, and the perseverance is just another level. So, Coach, I know we're way over time. I didn't even get to any of the Penn stuff. I wanted to talk about Joey McKenna and all these guys. Yeah. And I just, let's wind down with that. This will be the last question. What is the impact of Joey McKenna to your training room there at the Penn RTC?
Joey is just a phenomenal leader. As a 25-year-old, he just really impresses me. He's 25, but has the wisdom and savvy really of like a 45-year-old. But he's just been a great leader for the Penn wrestlers, the Drexel wrestlers. He's been a great leader for the other senior level guys like Ethan Lezak and specifically Dave McFadden, because they're buddies, from growing up together. He's had a huge impact on Dave McFadden. Now Mark Hall is here. He's just been a great leader for Mark and any of the guys that we bring in to the PRTC. Like, everybody loves Joey, is impressed with Joey. And I think just his technical ability, his discipline, how he lives out what he says, and his ultimately his faith and his character. He's just a phenomenal role model. And so I'm just really thankful we have him as part of our team. It's interesting you asked that. He was just trying to call me from Kiev, Ukraine. Wow. 2 minutes ago, because you wouldn't know this, but he was in the quarterfinals against the junior world champion from Azerbaijan, and he was up 1-0. And the guy had double underhooks, and Joey stepped around to try to throw him and got caught on his back, and he ended up losing in the quarters 4-1 against guy's a great opponent. I'll talk to Joey. He didn't need to take that risk. He was winning 1-0. Guy from Azerbaijan hadn't taken a shot the whole entire match. He didn't necessarily need it. And you may say, well, if he'd have thrown it into his back and pinned him, it'd have been awesome. I'm like, oh yeah. But when you're leading like that, you don't necessarily need to take a big risk. So I look forward to, talking
Coach,
to
I'm going to tell you right now, anytime Joey McKenna calls from Ukraine, you hang up this call, you take that call. I appreciate it though.
Yeah. You're doing a podcast. I mean, I think it's rude to like, hey, excuse me, Ryan, let me talk to Joey in Kiev.
No, I hear you. And the reason I was asking is, man, I've always been a big fan of him, even from when he was, back at Blair, but ever since he's got the man bun going and his new haircut, he's like, he just always looks in tip top shape. He's never out of shape. I mean, he just looks like a machine. And that weight class, a lot of people think it's Zane and Yanni, but McKenna's going to be right in there, and it's going to be a bloodbath coming up. I can't wait for that weight class.
Yeah, I'm just really thankful to have Joey, that he believed in our RTC. He was also looking at the New York City RTC, and Joey's, he was a 4.0 student. at Stanford and Ohio State, and he's wanting to apply to get his MBA at Wharton, the Wharton School of Business. And so he was looking at the MBA program at Columbia, the MBA program at Penn. And so, I mean, we're thankful we have Wharton, and I've coached Joey on multiple junior world teams. So we had that coach athlete relationship already. And so he's been with us for over a year now. And I think it's just, he's just, in many ways, we don't have team captains really. PRTC is not like we do team captains, but he's almost really an unspoken captain. And I think about Jordan Burroughs deciding to join us. I think there's a lot of reasons to that, but I think Jordan knows he can train with Joey, a weight class below him. He can train with Dave McFadden, a weight class above him, 79, and he can train with Mark Hall at 86. Yeah. So I think, having Joey as a weight class below Jordan was a big plus for Jordan joining us. And so we're just excited with the PRTC, what we're doing.
When does JB move into town?
He'll move here around September. So clearly he's focused on making the Olympic team and winning a gold medal in Tokyo. And then, after that, he'll move his family because he has 3 kids. So we have to get Beacon, his son, set to go to school. So he needs to be here enough time to make sure Beacon starts school appropriately. So we're excited to have Jordan join the PRTC. And we feel like that I've been doing this job for 4 years as the executive director and head coach. And it's taken 4 years for us to really develop our mission, which is to enrich lives locally and globally in Ukraine, right? Enrich lives locally and globally through the sport of wrestling. It's taken this time to develop our core values, which are faith over fear, right? Full effort, struggle well. And then the last one is to serve others. And I think that's what, I think separates us from other RTCs is that we're recruiting guys that are willing to serve others. I mean, Joey does all this stuff with Beat the Streets Philly, and he's not going, hey, how much are you going to pay me to do that? I mean, he genuinely is doing it to make a difference in the world. And so these guys that we're adding to our RTC, I think they have the heart of service, and they want to be Olympic champions. They want to be world champions, but they also want, they have this shirt, they believe in better, and they believe in better when they wake up every single day. They believe they're going to be a better man, a better wrestler, and make a better impact on the world. So, I mean, we're excited with what we're doing here. It's
exciting to see it from afar. Quick shout out to my man BJ Futrell, one of the OG members of the Penn RTC, another great guy who just fits that motto of what you're talking about there.
Totally.
It's really exciting to see what you've built, Coach Slay. Thank you so much for taking your time. This was an awesome conversation. I'm going to put it out next week. And best of luck to your guys as we wind down to this crucial final phase of training before the trials.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
That's it for this episode of Wrestling Changed My Life. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. As always, thank you to our sponsor, Spartan Combat. They're hosting a national tournament in Jacksonville, Florida, May 20th through the 23rd. You can register now at SpartanCombat.com. To watch the video interview of this episode, go to Wrestling Changed My Life on YouTube. You can also see the clips on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling Changed My Life. That's it, folks. We'll see you next time.